So let me give just a quick introduction to Mr. Nally. He has practiced law for over 27 years in a variety of areas, with concentration in civil litigation, probate, and appellate work. He practices from the law offices of James P. Nally on Michigan Avenue, and we appreciate him coming here to give us a good overview of the judicial process, which I know is confusing to many, both experts in the league and elsewhere. So come on up, Jim, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation from the League of Women Voters to be here. I really want to compliment the organization because there are a lot of partisan groups out there that obviously are backing candidates, and to have a neutral forum where people can come and exchange their ideas and people can meet candidates firsthand is wonderful. I also want to note that here in Oak Park, maybe a little known fact, I know there's a lot of famous citizens, but the father, mother of election law in Illinois, Mike Lavelle, for many years had a law office here on Marion Street. And Mike taught me election law and probably every single person who practices in election law. So you had a very famous citizen living here. Mike passed away a couple of years ago, but he lives on through all of us who continue to practice in this area. I want to thank you for the invitation. Peggy Kell, the Voter Service Chair, who I communicated with and we got everything together. I've been asked to talk a little bit today about the judicial system in Cook County, which is pretty interesting. Peggy was good enough to give me some questions that she had generated from people in the group. So I'm going to cover those in about 15, 20 minutes, and then I want to leave some time at the end for questions, which I'm sure you're going to have. So the first issue I was asked to address is, what is a job description for a judge? Well, judges in Illinois, the initial authority for judicial office comes from Article 6 of our 1970 Constitution. And that sets forth that we have one Supreme Court, an appellate court, and then circuit courts geographically divided throughout the state of Illinois. The number of judges varies. There are 7 members of the Supreme Court, and then there are 5 appellate districts, and depending on population, there are appellate judge seats that have been assigned to those. And then the circuit court, again, is a geographic division throughout the state of Illinois. There are 20, they just created a new circuit, so there are 23 circuits in the state of Illinois, the largest of which is the Cook County Judicial Circuit where we live. The Cook County Judicial Circuit is very, very large. There are approximately 215 elected judges who are elected throughout Cook County, and then additionally, those judges then elect approximately another 200 associate judges. So you as voters elect about half the judges who sit in the Circuit Court of Cook County. And that's done 2 ways. There is a countywide judicial circuit where people run throughout Cook County. And then in 1992, the legislature created sub-circuits in Cook County, which have now spread to some of the other larger population counties in Illinois as well. And Cook County is divided into 15 judicial sub-circuits. There are 10 judges elected from each of those sub-circuits. So of the roughly 420 or so judges who are circuit judges in Cook County, about 150 of them are elected out of the sub-circuit system. The idea behind the sub-circuits was that it would increase minority representation and would also lead to more diversity on the bench, both politically in terms of affiliation and in terms of gender, race, and background. And it's had that effect. Cook County, when people were running countywide, was overwhelmingly Democratic, and it still is. But there are a couple of the sub-circuits that were drawn in a way where there are a lot of Republican Party voters, so there's a couple of sub-circuits on the outer edge of Cook County where that is still predominantly areas where Republican candidates get elected. The sub-circuits are, sub-circuit judges have the same jurisdiction as a judge who's elected countywide. So they can be sitting in any of the courts in Cook County. They can be sitting, in the Daly Center, which is the main civil courthouse, or at 26th in California, which is the main criminal courthouse. And then the judicial system in Cook County is broken up geographically for purposes of administration. There are 5 municipal districts in Cook County. There's Skokie Courthouse, Markham Courthouse, Bridgeview Courthouse, a Rolling Meadows Courthouse, and I'm missing one here, Baywood, which is the one that covers this area. And a lot of the matters that are handled on a municipal basis, such as traffic issues and things like that, different towns are assigned to different courthouses there. But those courthouses also will generally have civil rooms that handle smaller suits, what are called suits in the municipal division. The Cook County court system administratively is broken down into several different components. In the civil area, first of all, there's a probate court where estates are handled for deceased people, also for disabled individuals, and that's located in the Daly Center. There's also a domestic relations court where matters of child custody, divorce, and things like that are handled. There are divisions, mainly, again, in the Daly Center, but these district courts that I talked about also have domestic rooms there too, to make it easier for people who have those issues to maybe be a little closer to home to handle that. There's also what's called the law division in the Cook County Circuit Court system. That is for cases where people are seeking money damages. It can be for contracts, it can be for auto accidents, it could be for medical malpractice. And in that division handles cases, larger cases, where the amount in controversy would exceed $50,000. The municipal court system handles civil matters where the amount in controversy would be less than $50,000. And there's, again, the Daly Center has municipal courtrooms, but there are also municipal courtrooms throughout the 5 districts that I talked about as well. So people can file those types of actions, again, a little bit closer to home, and it'll be a little bit easier for them to get to and from their court appearances. And then all the courthouses in the 5 districts also handle criminal matters. There are misdemeanors, and there are also felony rooms in all those. Felonies are obviously the more serious crimes. And the largest concentration of criminal courtrooms is at 26th in California, where there are felony rooms and misdemeanor rooms there. And the thought behind that was years ago when that court was established, it was built pretty much as an annex to the Cook County Jail, which is right there at 26th in California as well. And the idea was that if people were incarcerated awaiting trial at the jail, it would be easier to have a court facility right next to the jail so that they could move the people who were under charge from the jail to their court appearances. Now, as time's gone on, that's not always been the case, and there are felony and misdemeanor rooms in all the districts where now they have a system where people will either be bused if they are being held in Cook County Jail out to the districts for their court appearances. And there are provisions now with technology for video appearances. Those would be mainly for the less important, status hearings and things like that. At a trial, a person has an absolute right to be there to confront their accusers, and they would still be physically located in that courtroom. So it's a sprawling court system. There are a lot of judges. There are a lot of judges who do different things. How are judges appointed, and how long does that last? There are 2 ways that people go on the bench by appointment. If a vacancy occurs where somebody has died or retired, the Supreme Court has authority to appoint someone to fill that vacancy, but only till the next election. We have an elective system of judges here in Cook County, and every judgeship is elected by the people. So there are many, many, many people who are appointed and then will run for that position that they're appointed to in the next election. So judicial appointment generally will run for maybe 2 years, because every 2 years we have an election cycle where judges are up in even-numbered years. That's why in 2012 here we have a large number of people running for judge. So the Supreme Court can appoint people, but only on a temporary basis to fill that vacancy. Then the other group of judges that I talked about a little earlier are the associate judges. Their electorate, unlike being the voters of Cook County, their electorate are the circuit judges who are elected by the voters of Cook County. And the associate judges are elected by the full circuit judges. People apply for that position, and then there's a process where the various presiding judges interview candidates. And the way that election works is if there are, say, 5 vacancies for associate judge, the people who are interested in running present their credentials, and they are then winnowed down through this process of interviews to a final list of 2 people for each vacancy. So in a case where there'd be 5 vacancies for associate, there would be 10 people on that ballot. And that ballot then would go to the full circuit judges elected by you, the voters, who have the authority to choose the associate judges. And in that case, 5 people off the list of 10 would end up being elected as associate judges. So when you elect a judge, you're electing them, first of all, directly to fill their judicial vacancy, but also they have the power to elect associate judges. And associate judges have pretty much the same powers as a circuit judge does in terms of their jurisdiction. And again, there is no differentiation between the circuit judges who are elected in the sub-circuits or the circuit judges who are elected countywide. Once you're a circuit judge, you're a circuit judge, and your jurisdiction, your legal authority, you can be assigned to work in any one of the divisions of the court that I talked about earlier. Then there's something called the retention ballot. And the retention ballot is once a person has been elected judge, they are elected for a 6-year term as a circuit judge. If you are elected as an appellate judge or a Supreme Court justice, that's a 10-year term. But for circuit judges, every 6 years they have to face the voters, and the voters do not do anything other than vote whether they should be retained. So it's not a competitive election like the cycle where people are running for a judicial vacancy. It's an election where they basically run on their records, and their records are presented to the voters through forums like this and in publications, and the rule is that they have to have 60% of the voters who vote in that retention election have to vote to retain that judge. If less than 60% of the people vote yes to retain that person, they lose their judgeship. Interestingly, in Cook County, the last time a judge lost a retention election was, I believe, 1990. So although federal judges are appointed for life, the circuit judges are pretty much elected for life unless they do something that really brings their conduct to the attention of the electorate and people decide that we don't want this person on the bench anymore. So it's pretty much, when you are electing a judge in Cook County in a competitive election, you can pretty much count on that person will be serving in that office until such time as they choose to leave, subject to the 6-year retention for circuit judges and the 10-year retention for appellate or Supreme Court judges. Now, in Cook County, we have approximately 24 appellate judges. This cycle, I will tell you, is the busiest cycle in terms of election of judges that I've ever seen. There are 6 vacancies in the appellate court, which is an amazingly large number of vacancies in the First District Appellate Court. We also have a Supreme Court vacancy. There are 3 Supreme Court judges elected from Cook County. Then there's 1 Supreme Court judge each from the other 4 districts in Illinois. And we have a Supreme Court vacancy this time in Cook County, which was fairly unusual. Judge Fitzgerald, who retired, ran in, I believe, the year 2000. So, you know, maybe every 10, 12, 15 years there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court. It's pretty unusual. So we've got a Supreme Court vacancy, we've got 6 appellate court vacancies, we've got approximately 20 circuit-wide, about approximately 12 circuit-wide vacancies for people running for circuit judge in Cook County. And then we come to the sub-circuits. And I told you before, there were 15 of those. And in between the 15 judicial sub-circuits, with the number of vacancies there, we have almost 25 to 30 vacancies there. So when you add up the countywide circuit judgeships with the sub-circuit vacancies, we're pushing 40 vacancies this cycle for circuit judge, which, as I told you before, when we're electing something over 200 circuit judges countywide, it's a very, very large percentage. People have kind of wondered why there are so many vacancies this cycle. One of the reasons is that the sub-circuit system came into existence in 1992. And it's been 20 years since we first elected sub-circuit judges. So a number of the people who were elected in the first wave of sub-circuit judges in 1992 are retiring. And one of the questions I was asked was about pension benefits for judges and when do they start. There's probably a little bit of a tie-in there. The tenure for a judge to earn a full pension is 20 years on the bench. So there are a number of people, if they came in 1992, will be hitting that. And we've all read about the changes in the pension system that have gone into effect as of January 2011. So I think there are probably a number of people who are hitting that mark and saying, you know what, it's time. What the pension benefits for judges and when they start, they start accruing when the person is elected. That has been changed now. At one point, judges who were elected prior to January of 2011 are under the old pension system. Judges who were elected after January of 2011 will be under the new pension system. And there is a difference, a pretty significant difference. The pension is capped now for the new judges. And it's tied to basically the Social Security cutoff that all of us in private industry who are paying Social Security, right now the first $106,000 of income that you earn in a private job is subject to Social Security tax. And after that, you don't pay anymore. They've applied that to the judicial salaries. So now, under the new pension system, judges' pensionable credit will be limited to whatever, well, $106,000, and then they will get 80% of that. So right now, at the current level, a judge could retire after 20 years with a pension of about $65,000 or $66,000, because only up to $106,000 is subject to pension credit. I was asked about the salaries for judges. Circuit judges right now, the salary is approximately $180,000 per year. Appellate judges is about $190,000, and Supreme Court judges make a little over $200,000. It's a lot of money, but on the other hand, you want good people. And there are lawyers in private practice whose income exceeds those numbers, particularly at some of the larger firms, maybe double or triple that. So although it's a very large amount of money, you like to think that you get what you pay for. And there are a lot of people I know who are running for the bench who could probably do just as well or better if they stayed in private practice. But it is still a large salary, and people look at it and say, wow, that's a lot of money. Keep in mind, though, these are the people who are sitting in judgment of you. When you appear in a traffic ticket, as most of us will in our lifetime, or you appear in some other legal matter, you would hope that the person there is there because they're qualified, and you want them to be compensated in a fair manner for that. So one of the questions I was also asked to address was the primary election of judges. We have a partisan election system in Illinois. There are other states that have variations of what's called merit selection, and that's been proposed over the years in Illinois, but it has not been adopted. So in Illinois, people run under a party label and a party primary. So this election in March, we'll be having all the judgeships that I talked about here will be up for election, and people will be running either in the Democratic primary or in the Republican primary for those spots. As I talked about a little earlier, because of the demographics of Cook County, generally speaking, with a couple of exceptions, the Democratic primary turns out to be the election, particularly on a county-wide basis. I can't tell you the last time a county-wide Republican judicial candidate was elected. It probably goes back 40 or 50 years. There are still a couple of sub-circuits where the electorate is more Republican, and people running as Republicans enjoy kind of that same advantage that people running as Democrats do countywide, where if you're running out in the northwest area up in Barrington and Hanover Park in that area, pretty much the Republican primary for the sub-circuit there is the election. So you will see almost all the judicial elections in Cook County will take place on the Democratic primary ballot, because it's just the way it is. And if you want to be elected, you're going to be elected as the Democratic candidate in November. So this March, we will have many, many candidates running, and there's A lot of people here today that you're going to have a chance to meet are going to tell you why they should be elected. But it is a partisan system of election, and you do have to declare a party in order to vote in the judicial election. And again, in Cook County and the sub-circuits, with a couple of exceptions, the Democratic Party primary is the judicial election. One of the things I was asked to talk about also is what groups recommend the election and retention of judges. First of all, you have newspapers. Newspapers do endorsements. Local newspapers do endorsements. Very interestingly, the two major papers in Chicago, the Tribune and the Sun-Times, just had a split. The Sun-Times, this election came out and said, we will not do endorsements for any political candidates anymore. So there will be no endorsements by the Sun-Times. What they've been doing instead is running informational stories about various races. They haven't done a lot on the judicial front, but they've done more on elective offices, state representatives and such. So there'll be no endorsement there. The Tribune always endorses in judicial elections. And then the main groups that are involved in not necessarily endorsements, but the rating of candidates are the bar associations. Now in Cook County, there are probably at least 24 bar associations, and they're broken up in a lot of different ways. There are bar associations that are maybe ethnic related. There's a Hellenic Bar Association. There's a Decalogue Society of Jewish lawyers. There are interest groups. There's a lesbian, gay, transgendered bar association. Most of these groups don't do endorsements per se, but they do ratings. And the ratings are all pretty much done the same way. The groups have a questionnaire that they send out to the candidates, and the candidates are asked to fill that out, and it's pretty detailed. They ask them all sorts of questions about their background and experience. They go into great detail about how many cases have you tried, list the judges you appeared before on those cases, list your opponents. And then what they do is they have investigatory committees, subcommittees, and the Chicago Bar Association is the largest by far. And they will call judges that people appeared in front of. They will call attorneys who were on the opposite side of the candidate and ask them questions. They rate different areas such as, what do you think of this person's integrity? What do you think of their legal knowledge? It can also be very detailed in terms, are they punctual? Do they file things on time? How would you rate them professionally? Do they conduct themselves in a professional manner? Are they one of these lawyers that fights you tooth and nail on everything for no good reason? So it's a very, very detailed type of vetting. So when you look at these Bar Association ratings, particularly the Chicago Bar Association, the Illinois State Bar Association, and then these various affiliated bar associations, which form something called the Alliance of Bar Associations, where they have the candidates appear before them for rating purposes as a group, and they can all ask questions and go over the questionnaires that the candidates had filled out. People put a lot of time into this, and the bar associations are probably the logical group because we're going to be stuck with whoever gets elected. So when I step up in front of a judge, I would like to think that this is a person who's qualified and ought to be sitting there. So there's a strong amount of self-interest in having the bar associations conduct these inquiries and come out with recommendations. And then they will rate candidates on different levels, anywhere from highly qualified to not recommended. These ratings are all over the place now. They're on the internet, they're in publications all over the place. That is the single best source in terms of really getting to know who's running and a little bit about them, because the group that took the time to do these ratings are other lawyers. They talk to other lawyers who practiced with the people or maybe against them. They talk to judges where the lawyers appeared before them, so the judges can give an honest assessment. And the same thing happens on the retention election. When judges are running for retention, the judges have to fill out forms and talk about attorneys that have appeared in front of them, and the bar associations then will contact those attorneys and they'll say, what do you think of Judge so-and-so? What do you think of their legal knowledge? What do you think of their decorum? Do they treat people fairly in their courtroom? And all these factors go into the ratings that the bar associations go into. Okay, a couple of other things. Who pays for the court system? Well, take a look around, like most other things. The court system is kind of a hybrid in Cook County. Judges are technically state officers because they are created under the Illinois Constitution. So most of the salary of judges is paid through the state of Illinois. In Cook County, though, there is a partial stipend that is paid to the judges by Cook County in addition to what the state pays. So the judges are paid primarily by the state, but Cook County kicks in some of that too. And things like health insurance and stuff is done through the county system, tied into the county system. We also pay for it in an indirect way because all the courthouses are run by Cook County. So the physical structures where court is held are paid for by the citizens of Cook County through our property taxes and through user fees. And a lot of the court system is user fees. When you file a lawsuit, there are filing fees. Right now, to file a standard civil lawsuit in Cook County costs about $350. So when people come in and file that, $350 is going there, and they break it down. $10 goes to courtroom technology, and $50 goes to security, and $100 goes to this. So there are a lot of user fees that people who use the court system pay. So it's not entirely on the backs of the taxpayers who may say, well, I never go to court, why should I pay for this? But it is heavily subsidized, again, in terms of the facilities, the courthouses, support staff, things like that. A couple of other things I want to get into very quickly. Why are so many people running? Well, one reason is there's so many vacancies. So when there are a lot of vacancies, that's going to draw a lot of people to run. Certainly, I don't think there's an attorney who has ever practiced in a courtroom who hasn't walked out of there and said, I could do that. So there's a certain amount of feeling that after a while, I've practiced for a while, I know what I'm doing. I know as much as that judge sitting up there, why shouldn't I be sitting up there and making rulings too? There's a lot of public service interest by judges. Again, although the salaries on a scale, societal scale are good salaries, there are a lot of our judges, if they stayed in private practice, who could do at least as well, if not better. But at a certain point, they decide, you know what, I do want to give something back. I've participated in the legal system for many years, and now I want to be a part of it on the other end. There are a lot of people who just feel that they want to make a difference, and that's why they run for judge. So there are a lot of motivations for people, and certainly there's some people saying, hey, I'd like to make that kind of money. But I think most people are not in it for that. Most people are in it because they have an orientation towards public service, and particularly if they practice for a while, they know that this is such an important part of what happens in people's lives, and the judicial system can affect your liberty and can affect your wealth and can affect so many other things that they think, I want to be a part of that and do what I can do. So there are a lot of people who are running because they feel very strongly about that, and they've been in the system and they want to be a part of that. How does a candidate decide what vacancy to run for? Flip a coin. There's a lot of different things that go into it. It's almost like a big chess game. The rules were changed this year. Up to this year for circuit judge, you could file in any number of vacancies, and you had a week to decide what vacancy you're going to stay in. So you probably over the years signed petitions for people who were running in like 9 different vacancies, and you were wondering, well, you can only be judge once, so why are you running in so many? Well, people would file, and then they'd play this kind of chess game of like, well, who else is running in this vacancy? Okay, well, she's a pretty strong candidate, so maybe I'll get out of this one and run in that one. Or, he was a very successful personal injury lawyer, so he's going to have a lot of money to fund his campaign. So there are all these various different factors that go into it. People will look and say, there are a lot of women here in this race. Maybe I don't want to run with 5 other women. There are a lot of people will look at, ethnicity and things of that nature. Right now in Cook County, the saw is if you're a woman with an Irish surname, that is about the best chance you have in terms of being elected. Mary Margaret O'Connor is going to do really well. So, and I've actually, it's interesting, I've had male candidates in the past who have, fortunately for them, had kind of a name that, a Chris or a Pat or And you're going to see them on the ballot that way if they're smart. They're not going to be Christopher or Patrick. They're going to go with Chris or Pat. So as much as I talked about the bar associations doing these ratings and giving us a lot of information about people's qualifications, there's an enormous element of luck and an enormous element of chance. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. That's why forums like this are so important, because educated voters will make the right choices. They'll pick people who are qualified. And otherwise, it can be a ballot lottery. Just if you get in the right race with the right name or the right balance of gender or ethnicity of other candidates, that might make you a winner. So I've covered these topics here in a kind of general way. I hope I've been helpful, but I want to leave some time for questions too. So, yes, ma'am.
Of the various bar associations that do the ratings, are there any that you would recommend that are more reliable than others?
I would start with the Chicago Bar Association, simply because it's the largest. And they have been doing this the longest, and they have the greatest number of investigators who actually go out and make phone calls and talk to lawyers. So Chicago is really kind of the keystone of all of them. But I would look at all the Bar Association ratings, but Chicago is probably the single one if I were going to look at one. Chicago Council Lawyers, the Illinois State Bar Association. There are a lot of bar associations who do a good job, but if you're going to look at one, that's the one I'd look at.
Would you address the role of the chief judge and who elects them and what the term is and what his role is?
Yes. The chief judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County is again elected by all the other circuit judges, by his or her peers. And they're elected on a 4-year term. And then every 4 years they face their electorate, which is the other judges. 3-year term, I'm sorry. And they face all the other judges for election. The chief judge then has the authority to assign people into all these different divisions of the court that I talked about. So they have a great deal of authority in terms of who's assigned to the criminal courts or the probate courts or even particular courtrooms within that. There are presiding judges that are also picked by the chief judge, and they preside over these different divisions of the court. Tim Evans is the chief judge right now. He's been chief judge for well over 10 years. Yes?
You mentioned one individual that was running for the 11th sub-circuit. I don't know if you want to mention that there are other people in the fact that sub-circuit, as others are kind of divided, so it's confusing for the voter. There's 2 openings in the 11th, and there are some that are like that.
Yes. The sub-circuits each have 10 judgeships assigned to them. And in any particular election cycle, there may be more than one of those vacancies up for election, as in the 11th this time. So the other interesting thing about the sub-circuits is they were drawn in 1992 when they were first brought into use. And unlike all the other, we just went through this redistricting thing, they've never been redistricted. They don't have to be, because under the Supreme Court rule, one person, one vote ruling, representative offices have to be redistricted every 10 years with the census so that everybody has roughly an equal number of voters in their district that they represent. Since judges technically don't represent people, they're impartial arbiters, there's no legal requirement that the sub-circuits be redistricted based on population, and they haven't been in 20 years, which does lead to disparity now. Just with demographic changes, there are a lot of sub-circuits that have more people than the other ones do. But as far as I'm aware, there's been no move to change those boundaries.
When the sub-circuits were formed in 1990, I'm curious as to how they were formed. For example, the sub-circuit that we're sitting in looks like a very good example of gerrymandering, since it doesn't have contiguous communities and a river forest is not a part of this community. I'm just wondering how those were set up initially.
They were set up demographically. There were political considerations, as I said. Surprisingly, the legislature drew the map. When it was originally drawn in 1992, it was drawn so that there'd be 3 or 4 sub-circuits where Republican candidates would have a good chance. And then a lot of the districts in the city and on the edge of the city, even the west side, were drawn to make sure that minority candidates would have a better shot. But again, demographics have shifted, particularly there were probably 4 subcircuits when they were drawn that would be overwhelmingly likely to elect Republican candidates. That's probably down to about 2 now.
I'm going to say one more question because we want to make sure we have time for the meet and greet.
Sure.
So this will be the last question. Can you stay after also?
Yeah, I'll be around.
During the meet and greet? Okay, so we'll take one more for now and then we'll move to the meet and greet.
Yes, ma'am.
In today's economy, there are a lot of people without jobs. How do those people, if they want, they might be very good to be a candidate, but how do they finance running?
Good question. There are a lot of people who run and are good candidates. You got to get your message out, and that means being able to do mailings and cable TV and signs and whatever else. And it like anything else in politics, it's become very money driven. Again, there have been suggestions that there be public financing, at least of judicial races, where people could check off on their income tax return, donate a certain amount of their return or direct it to that. But so far that hasn't gone anywhere.
How about a round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you very much.